reached the 10 o'clock according to the clock on my cell phone. I assume that's correct. You're going to have opening carrot here first, and then I've got a couple of minor announcements. Go by.
Kia ora. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E he ake ana te ātukura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora.
Okay, we have an apology from Panatui. He is on his way to other meetings, so he did phone me last week and maybe he wouldn't be here, so we should do the right thing and note his apologies and grant him leave of absence for this particular meeting. Do I have a mover to that extent? Yeah. Thank you.
Second.
Kelly. Unless it was Anne, I'm not sure who got in first there. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, if any? Carried. Small rearrangement in the agenda has been suggested to assist our auditor, Ben Raynor. And so we're going to move item 7.2 to immediately after the apologies declaration of interest and confirmation of minutes. So I expect to get there probably about 10 past, if he's still not quite joined us online. We'll just move on to whatever item is next. So do we have any conflicts of interest for this particular agenda? Nothing noted. Confirmation of the previous minutes on pages 8 to 17. Perhaps the minutes themselves are pages 10 onwards. Perhaps let's do a page turn if there's any matters arising or matters of fact that anyone wishes to raise. For accuracy, I should say. Page 1 of the minutes, that's page 10. Page 11 of the pack. Page 12. Page 13. On the basis no one's speak, do I have a mover for those minutes? Thank you, John. Seconder?
Yep.
I think that was Kofi, was it? Looking the other way. At the moment, all those in favour? Against, if any? Carried. And also, I should say, welcome, babe. There, I see you're online. And Hilda. Thank you. Who else have we got up there? Of councillors. No, that's all the councillors members. Thank you. Penny hasn't quite arrived, so we'll skip forward to 7.1, which is on page 18 of our pack. Agreed. Steve? If no one's got an objection, we'll note Steve's apology for slight lateness. I know you did say to me yesterday, but you may be a few minutes late. Is everyone happy with ending that previous resolution?
Yes.
Excellent. So 7.1. No, it's 5.1, isn't it? Open resolutions, yeah, those numbers are all. I apologize for misleading team. You're happy to move in that direction? Any matters anyone wishes to raise?
Probably.
I don't think there's much in there for anyone to raise, but
Just noting that this will be on the agenda going forward.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good. It just gives a wrap up place for anything that has been carried forward. So you are happy to move, Kofi, your second. All those in favour? Against, if any? Carried. We have item 7.3, and if we can start with that one. Who's speaking to that one? Is it Angie?
Is it all?
Item 5.3. Well, 5.2. My run sheet here. So that's out.
Open resolution fund.
And we've done that.
Angie's.
Yeah, so it is Andrew's report. Come and join us, the table.
I'll take the report as being read. This financial report is at the end of 31st of March 2025. Again, the budget timings is still one of the main themes for the variances. So at a high level, financial performance, the total income year to date is behind by 3.2, although it's a better result compared to last month of 7.9. However, in terms of our expenditure, we continue to be behind in our operational spend by 17.9, up from last month by 2.4. In terms of capital expenditure, although we're ahead by 14.7 million year to date, compared to the end of the year position of 204 million. Forecast, we're still behind by 147.3 for the year. The main areas are in roading and footpaths, wastewater and water. And looking at the Te Koko reports, we seem to be in line with what they're reporting also. Treasury, we remain in a consistent position with our cash on hand, bank facility and debt. I suppose for the update from the last half, we've on page 51, we included more of a breakdown in terms of the subsidy, and we have tidied up the unbudgeted expenditure area on pages 58 to 60.
Questions? That was co-filing the question as opposed to stretching.
Yeah, questions. In the section operational expenditure, it's got a really good down. You know, where the overspends are, where the underspends are, and because we're like nearly at the end of the financial year, I was wondering, you know, you go to page 55. Here's the maintenance and the budget, 209k. You know, that the other amounts aren't so much. Planning and policy underspent at the bottom of that paragraph, and general expenses 664k due to lower than expected commissioner fees. So, you know, what I'm seeing is there are some operational lines which, having been rated for in this current financial year, not spent. Is that then going to be rolled over to the next year, or is it being sucked up into the areas that are overspent? Because what concerns me is that we've rated all these budget lines and they weren't needed. So we've over budgeted, overrated, and yeah, I just feel it's concerning. We should be more in a, so that we're not overcharging ratepayers and ending up with, you know, overrating them and having, it's not a slush fund, but having money which can be apportioned into another budget line. I don't think that's good finance, and it's not good for the ratepayer. I think that those lines that we've underspent, we need to make sure that we pull them back going forward in the new budget, so that it's in a deficit going forward. You know, we should not.
Reforecast.
You can't reforecast when you've set a budget.
And the forecast next year.
Yeah, we need to under forecast for next year. So I just want to get some idea of where that money is going to go now that it's not spent, because it's a lot. Yeah, and because we've already rated for it, take the planning and policy, which I assume is for the district plan. Are we then, because we've already rated for that money, it's sitting there, are we pulling back the budget next year?
I understand your concerns, Kelly, and just for clarity in terms of the formation of our annual report and our financial statements, if we aim for a balanced budget, but if we're underspent 100,000 on one department and overspend 100,000 on another, I presume in terms of P&L that just gets offset. So that's one issue. So there will be some balancing going on there, but I wouldn't expect that to be for very large amounts of money. Beyond that, I have heard that in government, people spend in the last month of the financial year. Very clear message to GMs that we're not doing that. If we have underspend in any areas, then obviously our next budgeting process, we will be looking to adjust by being informed by the underspend in this year's budget.
Yeah, that can lead rushed jobs or items that weren't necessarily a priority for the residents or ratepayers and the governance at this table. So yeah, I'm concerned at those large sums. I do have some other questions.
I think the key message is that we're not going to rush to spend unspent budget. And second message is, as natural to process, obviously with our next round of budgeting, we will be taking that information into consideration when you set our new budget. So hopefully over time.
Sorry, I'll just finish mine, otherwise I'll forget where I am. It's similar to that is I'm not seeing how many staff vacancies there are. Usually we would get that somewhere, I'm not sure which report it is, but it would always raise alarms for me that we're rating people for vacant seats, for jobs that after a long period of time are left unfilled. So yeah, just park that one there with you to ponder. And throughout the narrations that you've got here, Angie, where it's like most of the lines say it's unbudgeted, but there was a resolution at, through a council to blah, blah, blah. It concerns me, and I think if I was a member of the public looking at this and it says Rawene land purchase, blah, 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 is unbudgeted, be thinking, well, who made that decision? Why is that this council just willy-nilly doing all these unbudgeted things, but decisions are being made at this table to have those items in there? Yeah, most of them have explanations, but some of them don't. And then the other question, where it says there's an unbudgeted amount, some of them are actually from a previous financial year. So the question is, when we have an item that's in a previous financial year that was unbudgeted and it was actioned through a resolution at this table, doesn't that go in the next annual plan? So then it becomes a budgeted item?
Depends where it sits in the work program. If it's a carrier, if it's a multiple project or whatever, we would have it in the next year, or a program of work. We would budget for it if we've been told.
And final question, I think. We didn't release the purchase price of the aforementioned parcel of land, but it's in that resolution that we did at a council meeting, but it's in this clear as day. is there some commercial sensitivity that we have now cleared up by having that address of the Rawene land purchase in this report?
I'm not too sure. I need to go back on that one. That would have been my reference back to a report.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
okay.
PX does.
It's my report. So, yeah, just, okay. I think it's great transparency, but maybe the road name should have not been in there.
Okay.
I did have another question, and I need to think it through a little more, but just off the top of my head, there was a line in here that said commissioner fees were over budget. Top of page 55.
And
So it says under, but then you go down to the second bullet point, environmental management is overspend 145. The bulk of the overspend is 162K for commissioner fees. So I'm going to ask if we could get a breakdown of, is that resource and building consent commissioner fees, licensing, please, just so we understand why there's that overspend. Thank you.
Councillor, you had questions. I just see that we have now got our auditors online.
Oh, sorry.
Are we in a position, are we happy to actually break this discussion and come back to it at this point?
Yeah, I don't think we've got to move in a second anyway, so we can
No.
shoot through to.
No, so maybe we move to item 5.2, which is on pages 1946. Kia ora, Benny and Darren, welcome to the meeting. Benny, I'm a bit surprised here that Darren's got such a lovely office in the background and you're the partner.
Well, things have changed, Graham. See how it's gone. It's different times.
You must do your stuff very well.
I do.
Really.
Yeah. Look at it. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all again.
What's
Hi, everyone.
yours?
Graham, shall I just kick it off the way I normally do?
Go for it.
All right. Okay, I will take the report as read as usual, and I won't go through it in detail, but I'll just touch on some key parts of it. So I'm not sure exactly which page it is on your pack, but on our report it is on page 6. If we'll maybe start there with the dashboard that sets out the areas of audit focus. Now, just to recap, the purpose of this report is just to communicate to the committee, what the high-level audit plan is for the upcoming financial year. As I always say, we do look at the entire bundle of information that comprises the annual report, including the financial statements to various degrees, but certain areas, for obvious reasons, we tend to focus a bit more on, spend more effort on. So, look, in essence, the areas of focus, no surprises. There hasn't been much change since previous years. It's always the valuation of the infrastructure assets. As everyone is aware, Council has a very, very large asset base spread across a wide geographical region. There's a requirement to have those carried at fair value at all times, revalue them at least every 3 years on a cycle basis. So a lot of judgment goes into that for obvious reasons. Huge volume of data that needs to be worked through. So that represents quite a significant focus area as a result for audit purposes. In terms of how we approach that, Council will do, the finance team will carry out the valuation work, we'll speak to the valuers, we'll look at the work they've done in terms of the assets that have been or are being revalued in the accounts. And then the final piece to that is considering the appropriateness of any judgments made around assets that have not been formally revalued on the basis that there's an assumption that they wouldn't have moved significantly in value since the last valuation. So those are the two key judgment areas. We'll work through that. Historically, that's been pretty clean. It is just a very big exercise, quite voluminous, and a lot of detailed calculation to work through. Which then flows on to the other one, is the mandatory one around management's ability to override the standard controls that are in place. Now, our audit is largely substantive, but we do have to be mindful as auditors that fraud or manipulation of results that you look at could happen in various ways. So we design specific procedures in response to that through various techniques. And if we do find something, investigate it further, and we'll report back on that at the end again. I won't go into the revenue recognition into detail. That's all just about the rate setting and the various revenue streams. That's relatively straightforward. Apart, the only important piece there is the legislative compliance of the rate strike. It's a standard thing that we do. So we'll work through that. And then the statement of service performance, probably the one that will be slightly different this year because of the updated long-term plan. New performance measures would have been compared to prior years. There's quite a bit that we have to do these days on the statement of service performance. From an audit perspective, we now have a firm set of standards that govern how you audit and how you report performance information. So again, just not a significant risk of misstatement in that, but a huge chunk of work to actually get to that position to be able to say it is presented fairly in line with what is required. The other two pieces, the ESG and climate change and the matters raised by the OAG, those are also pretty standard. ESG and climate change council is not a climate reporting entity at this stage, so not required to disclose climate statements or prepare climate statements that need to be audited. We consider the impact or potential impact of climate change threats where it could affect the financial statements. In this case, is there any climate-related threats that are significant to any of the assets that are under valuation? Again, not a particularly massive area, given the nature of the assets, what they are, and what's involved. And then finally, the OAG matters is the standard stuff around governance, probity and wasteful expenditure, where we actually look at certain sensitive expenditure that have been incurred, policies around that. Does it follow best practice OAG guidance? We do some fairly focused testing on all of those and report back on any deficiencies or improvement areas in that regard. So that's quite a lot, but it's a bit of a high-level overview of what is in more detail further out in the report. Happy to take questions at this point about anything, or I just move on.
Any questions from Councillor Court?
A couple of things, thank you. So if you've got your pencil there, I'll just rattle them off and then
Sure.
you can get to me. Now, I know you talked to valuation of infrastructure assets.
Mm-hmm.
So on page 7, our page 26,
Yep.
it talks to revaluations of infrastructural assets. And I note it references sewage, water, refuse, stormwater and roading,
Mm-hmm.
but it's short of capturing our other hard infrastructure, such as halls and public facilities. Is this
Yep.
intentional?
So not each and every asset category gets revalued every year, so not all the assets. So what we focus on the ones that are in scope for a revaluation. So and that could change during the course of the audit, but every audit asset is held at fair value. But we don't look at all, or council's not required to revalue each and every asset class every year. There's a general assumption that it will only be every 3 years that a particular asset class come under valuation, in which case you'll see it on that page, if that answers the question.
So if I continue with that line of thinking, you state current market conditions and high inflation may cause material movements in valuations, and their revaluations are not appropriate because of incorrect assumptions and or data, and therefore may not adequately be reflected in the financial statements. Reconciliation between the general ledger and the fixed asset register is required by 30 June. So my relates to confidence that this is going to be achieved within the stated timeline. It might not be a question for you, it might be a question for the CEO.
I think that'll be a question for management, the reconciliation.
Perhaps I might just chip in there that I have had a discussion with Charlie, who is an apology today for good reason, given his birth of a son in the last couple of days. Because I've asked much the same questions as, have we got the right areas being revalued, and are there any indicators that there have been market movements in any of the areas we're not revaluing that might lead us to needing to be considering those. And they've done some initial work against indices that are out there in the sector, and they've certainly come back to us and assured us that the choice that we've got is the right ones, right areas that we're looking at on a cyclical valuation basis. So the rules are that we can revalue on a cyclical basis, providing there's no evidence to suggest that there's a material movement in the areas that we have not valued since the last time they were valued. So,
I should also, and I should also just you touched on the point, Graham, the materiality factor that comes into play. It's really there's a big materiality number or quantitative level above which asset valuations become material. So there might well be some very small assets that are completely immaterial, that will never have a material or at risk of a material market movement.
Jenny, just a question, is the valuation done as a desktop operation, or do they go and have a look?
So it's the desktop one is where council's decided we don't think a formal valuation is necessary for a particular asset class. They'll do a desktop valuation, which affirms or corroborates that assumption. Where an asset class is in scope for revaluation, or that desktop review indicates that, market movement will be material, it goes into, or it should go into a formal valuation exercise, a detailed valuation exercise.
Steve, I don't think Anne had quite finished.
That's right, just diving on that topic.
Yep.
Yep,
I think Anne's still on that topic.
I would be keen at some point to see the valuations for some of our assets. Some of the figures coming through for renewals, particularly in our halls, are staggering sums, quite staggering sums, compared $800 to $1 million for a renewal or a refurbishment. I think we need to have a correlation between the value to the ratepayer and the cost of maintaining the asset.
I may just respond to further discussion I've had I've highlighted to Charlie on behalf of the accounting team that all valuation should actually end up coming to this committee for review. And I'm suggesting that be done in the August meeting and that is good practice for the Audit and Risk Committee, be reviewing the basis of the valuation and saying, is there anything in that we, with our knowledge, would lead us to think that those are not fair representations.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Your page 9, our page 28, you talk about the rates questionnaire.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if this is something that should come to this committee too.
No, that is an internal audit procedure document.
Internal.
Yeah, that we test. Yeah, that is. I can look into it and see how much we can share with that, but that is an audit procedure that we carry out, and it's a checklist that we complete to check that it complies with the legislation. But that's after management and council's already done that exercise. We just double check that. So in the first instance, council should and finance team should themselves make sure that the rate strike was compliant, and we audit that.
And you report back on that in your audit to give us some.
Yeah. If we report back on it in the final updated version of this report, if there's any findings on that, we come back on that. Yes.
Thank you. Your page 11, our page 30, sensitive spending. Will you report back on that? That's of high interest.
Yeah. So we report it back on the procedures that we carry out on that. So yes, every report that we, if there's issues, we report it.
Thank you. And the last one is really just noting the commentary on your page 14, now page 33, that the elected member allowance and reimbursement policy has not been updated since 2019.
Mm-hmm.
That does need to be updated.
That's the typical finding that we report back from doing that sensitive expenditure testing. Those are the sorts of things that we report back that we find. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. That's all from me.
Can someone write a note on that review of that policy? There's one that's random that I just remembered now. Under the current policy, it might not be in that policy, we have to declare any gifts that have a value higher than $10. I can tell you right now, I have not been doing that for everything. I think the cap is too low. Or maybe it's appropriate, but Auckland Council's one is like $500 because they'll win the paper over their tickets they got for Edinburgh. I think that there could be a more appropriate level across our other councils, and I'm using this opportunity, sorry, just to remember and get it captured.
Could I suggest that review of this policy is put on an action list that will appear on that wonderful report that had nothing on it, so that we've now got it there, and we'll look to get some guidance out of Guy and his team as to expected timing of that. So if we could get that servicing at the next meeting, because I really wasn't aware that one hadn't been reviewed since 2019. So thank you for raising that. In answer to some of the questions that Councillor Court raised, the report back to us at the end is more reporting by exception. So if they have a finding, so if there is nothing mentioned, the assumption is that they've done their work and there are no particular findings. So when the final report comes in, so it's not necessarily a positive affirmation. We've looked in this area and we didn't find anything. Attempts, otherwise the report would be rather massive, given the hundreds of hours of work that they put in. So it is reporting by exception. Basis. Back.
And it is on a test basis. We don't go through everything. It's on a test basis.
Understood.
Yeah. So.
Thanks, Benny. Just a few questions. I'll go through quickly. I won't talk about the assets that you're doing. Councillor Court's gone through some of that. Well, except for one thing, some of these, you're looking at fair value, which it should be, but market value for some of our water assets is practically zero. No one wants them. So I think that's a job. I'm not sure how you work that one out. But the question I have, areas of audit focus. Now, I'm happy with this, what you're doing in your focus, but I do have a query, and that is other areas that may come up. And for example, where a contract has been let and there's significant variation to the contract, or where work has been completed but the contract, where the work has not been completed but the contract has been paid. I'm sure you come across things like that. And wonder if you do audits in that area. So that's one question. If I answer it now, that's fine.
Sure. So I should just clarify. Yes, we can come across some of those types of things during the course of our work, but the scope of our audits, if you read what it's designed to do, is not focused on operational matters such as that. All right. So yes, we do look into contracts that have been undertaken, and we may, through the audit procedures, become aware of stuff like that. But the audit scope doesn't specifically include a focus on to specifically go into that, unless we become aware of something, or whatever means, that says that is a risk of some sort. Then we'll look into that. But it's not so. If that makes sense.
It does. Although you have a focus on fraud, which should be looking at those, and you're looking at them through.
Sorry, I didn't quite get that first part.
Oh, I said you have a focus, for example, on page 25, your page 8, where you go to management ability to override controls.
Yes. And
that comes under further, when you mention it further down, you obviously have to focus on fraud, but you're looking at it from a financial sense, which is great.
Yep.
But generally, if you look at the fraud case that occurred, it's mostly in the operational area. And so I know this is the outside of the scope here, so I don't want to.
Yeah. No, look, I can be very clear. If we become aware of anything, and it's happened in the past, where concerns have been raised and whatever, we have certainly acted on that and got the necessary specialists involved and ran the issues to ground. We will never look past something like that if it's comes up.
Yeah, that's good. The other one was, it's outside of your scope really, but I'll be real quick. One thing that was raised in Auckland, I use Auckland as an example, I'm sure it's everywhere. Of the overcharging that has occurred, like there was a raised crossing example, there was the skis that they put in, which was significant charges. And it's more of a question actually, how can we get a view of what is realistic? I know that's I think a hole that council is falling into. The tricky one.
Sorry, you broke up just a little bit again there at the back. I got sort of every second or third word. I apologize. Yeah.
Contract charge that they're very high. For example, the overcharging that came up.
Right. Yep.
Here's Auckland as an example. Yep. But it'd be nice to actually know what is a fair value somehow. I'm not too sure how to do that. It's not really the role of.
Yeah, look, I'm going to be honest, from an financial statement audit perspective, that is probably something that is outside of the scope. That is a very, very different specified piece of work that you have to undertake. We can, what we've done in the past was say, well, this is the level of contractor spend that's happened, and these are the main contractors that have been paid, and these are the amounts and whatever. But under the current engagement scope, we can't go into forming a view as to whether that was the right fair amount to be charged or whatever. Again, some of that may become obvious through the work that we do, and in which case we'll report it. But in terms of actually actively going into that, that is something that is, like you say, outside of the scope of a financial statement audit.
Yeah, thank you. Like affordability of our key risks.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll leave that. That's me. But otherwise, I'm very happy with what you've got here, and I'm looking forward to the results of the audit.
Thank you.
I think it may be worthwhile stepping backwards and saying what is the purpose of the external audit, and that is the role of the auditors to express an independent opinion on the truth and fairness of the published financial statements taken as a whole.
Yeah.
Okay. The whole financials, rather than individual balances. So they have an obligation as a standard 240 to consider where the key risks of fraud are. The auditor's role is not to find fraud. It is, but should they see any indicators, it is to act upon that. So for it to be material, and impacting the financial statements taken as a whole, it has to be a really large number. So the primary purpose of responsibility for fraud sits at this table and with management along the track. So to get the scoping right, it's got to be a number that's big enough to be material to the accounts. What is material? It's an error or misstatement in the accounts that's significant enough to cause the user of those financial accounts to form a different economic conclusion and an impact on their the decisions that they make. So that's in auditing terms. So that's why the materiality numbers somewhere down in here, on whichever it is, are reasonably large numbers. Primary responsibility for maintenance of internal controls and detection of fraud sits with the council as a whole and its management and staff to have processes in place. So just to get the concept of, it's one that probably as auditors, and I'm being a former auditor and a regulator in this area, get common questions on is why didn't you find that fraud of $50,000? Well, in terms of the whole organisation, if a number was misstated by $50,000, would it change the economic decision users of those financials make? And the answer in this case would be no. It's too small a number. So that's just to be clear where the everything sits as to which is our responsibility and which is part of Benny and his team's work.
Yeah, and we do set that out in, I think it's in the first couple of pages of the report as well. And it's also in the engagement letter. It explains all those responsibilities quite clearly.
Councillor Gordon, you were indicating you had a question. Was it on this topic?
Yes,
Thank you.
just in light of what's happened at Watercare, where a number fraudulent invoices were lodged, that each on their own were small, but collectively amounted to a significant sum. I just wanted to test with you, Graham, how we as the Board of Governance that sits here in this room, we should be looking for, as part of those internal council processes and controls, to give us confidence and therefore the public confidence that we're not vulnerable to that kind of exploitation also. Because it seems to me that if the debate hinges around what is material and 50,000 is too small, or 50,000 times 10 is not too small. So just some feedback on that.
Yes, with that particular case and just judging on what's been in the public media on the Watercare case over the last 3 weeks, to be honest, it would be incredibly difficult for any council from the internals to actually ever detect that, because it is my understanding from the what's been in the papers is that the manager concerned was actually raising fraudulent invoices and passing them out to a supplier who then put it through their system thinking it was all approved by the council and added their 10 or 15% handling margin on it and then paid the invoice from their side. So there was, it was probably being lost between invoices each month of millions of dollars there, and it was tens of cases, like 40 or 50 cases, I think, if I recall the article. So I've reflected on that with my roles in other councils, and we've concluded actually that is incredibly difficult to find, and it's something that does need to be addressed. And I'm sure that the team here, and unfortunately Charlie is not with us today, be able to comment, but we have had some discussions on what can we do. So it's reliant on our internal audit processes and our controls and checking. That's an area that this committee ought to be thinking about. So your point is well raised. Same topic?
No. But this paper, yes.
Get this paper. We've got Kelly, yes, you were the next one I've got on my list in the batting order.
Thank you, and this is probably more for the CE. It's a proposed audit plan with a estimated CPI increase of 9.8%, but the annual amount official CPI for the end of March was 2.5%. So I'm wondering where a 9.8% CPI increase comes from.
This actually news to me.
Oh, no, that's probably one for me to write. That's the fee proposal.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
is a proposal, so it's estimated 9.8, but that's.
Yeah. No, I'll address that, and we've been working through this with the OAG. So the general approach that we've taken, and this is across the board, and agreed with the OAG, was that there would be a base uplift of CPI, but wage CPI tied to the professional services sector, because that's where we operate, not general CPI. So what we've done is adjusted the base, which was, and I think that was about 4% uplift. The delta between that and the number that you see in front of you is we put forward, so there's an audit budget. Our proposal letter, I suppose, has been circulated, but there's a budgeted number of audit hours, and every year we benchmark, well, where do we actually end up in terms of actual audit hours spent versus the budgeted hours. Now, over the last, and this goes back to the Audit New Zealand days as well, the actual audit hours have significantly exceeded the budgeted hours for various reasons. And on analysing that, what we've come to the conclusion is that because the council systems are quite old, there's a lot of manual intervention necessary to prepare the annual report. It just hasn't kept up with modern day technology, really. So, and on top of that, we have additional audit requirements under law that we need to comply with. Those are getting more complex. The reporting requirements are getting more complex every year. So we can't really effectively deploy all the tools that we have as a firm to make it, to gain the efficiencies and do the audit in as efficient manner as it could possibly be done, because of this manual and these legacy systems and things that we have to work through. So we have this perpetual overrun each and every single year where the budgeted hours are just not realistic, given the state of the systems and the volume of information and the volume of activity. So what we've proposed was said, we'll make a small adjustment in the scheme of things, and it was about 150 hours, I think, that we figured we need in over the normal budgeted hours. If you go back in history, we've in principle agreed that with the OAG, and that's what makes up the delta, the extra amount, because we're going to come, cost just hasn't kept, or the actual hours budgeted has not been accurate. We've got enough historical data to say what we actually need to do is not is way more than what the budget historically has been. So that's what we're proposing. That is certainly something that my view can come off in future when there's better systems in place, more stable finance team, less manual intervention, those sorts of things. There's a range of things, but at the moment, the way we're going, the budgeted hours is just not accurate. It's not a realistic reflection.
Thank you for that, Benny.
Yeah.
My final question is to both staff and you. Do we have adequate resources, and you touched on it a little, do we have adequate resources within the finance team to carry out the tasks required for audit and our BAU at the same time and meet the deadline? We're trying to do this before October.
My thought, I've also had this discussion with Charlie, and we've got a new CFO starting very shortly, who comes certainly with a lot of experience. We made huge steps under our previous CEO from where we were a couple of years back. We have also just gone through the implementation of the later version of the financial reporting package and upgraded that, and we're starting to see the benefits and the quality of the reporting increasing. Further controls are now able to be implemented, a key one being authorisation of journals. So that will only, but from Benny's point of view, speaking for Benny, if I shouldn't really, but that benefit is only happening relatively late in the financial year. So we've still got that existing carry forward problem for probably at least 9 months a year. So it's incremental increases. We need to think about our sign-off processes because we've got an election on the 11th of October, is it, ladies and gentlemen that are involved? It's a magic date. So if we end up with a situation that we can't get to sign off prior to the election, we're going to need to have the likes of myself being giving assurance to the new council and staff as well that they can actually sign off the accounts for us. Because of the timing of the election, it's 2 weeks after the election, usually before the election is confirmed as results. By the time the council then convenes, oaths of office are taken, it's going to be past the 31 October deadline for filing. So the timing of the election is likely to force us to go into breach of our statutory obligations to produce. To me, the answer is that the election was badly timed by government and left and right hand were not talking to each other. 1 month later would have been rather brilliant in the cycles. I do see this at other councils and I'm intending on writing to the minister to point out the errors of their ways. Whether they'll listen or not is anyone's guess. But so those are some of the challenges sitting in there and what's happening. And there might well be some other thoughts that you would raise from your CE that.
Yeah, just being mindful that audit often puts pressure on staff and we get told, oh no, we can't do that. Staff are focused on this. So how are we ensuring that the BAU in the audit will be addressed?
Thank you very much for summing that up. I'm confident that we're adequately resourced to get everything done. So this will be my third audit experience. First one, we were way behind the curve. Last year, big improvements, I think, were acknowledged. The process went quite smoothly. As Graham just pointed out, we have a new CFO coming on board imminently. So I think we're in good shape.
Maybe just one last point. If you look at, I'm just looking at the history, but our budgeted hours has always has been sitting around, I think it's the 1,300 hour mark. We've consistently gone into 2,000 hours each and every year. I definitely believe it should be around 1,300, but it'll take some time to get there.
I'd also
Yeah,
Benny, you've got $9,800 as CPI increase. So knowing what I know about the accounting sector and the fact that Darren probably should just take his headphones off for a second. The difference in salaries between New Zealand and even Australia are quite significant. I've seen situations of regional staff that were being paid, say, $85,000 to $90,000, being offered jobs in Australia with almost $100,000 higher remuneration. And that's really hard for a young person to ignore on the way across. So there's real, within the accounting sector, there is real wage pressure out there, particularly for auditors. They are a very scarce breed within the accounting community. Some say if you're 30 and not audited, you miss something. Others say if you're 30 and still auditing, you're mad. Sorry.
I'll pass that.
It's a really hard part of the accounting industry to be part of. It takes a special breed with really specialist training. So I understand, and I think CPI increase at 9,800, which works out about 3%, 3.5%. Is probably quite generous, and the accounting firms are experiencing severe staffing issues and shortages as a result of these and profit margin squeezes and all the rest. So given that's my own sector, I just thought I would toss that one in. So in my view, the request and the proposed fee is quite reasonable circumstances. Yes, it is a large number. And it's driven largely by government regulation, not only auditing standards, but the scope of the audit. Auditing a statement of service performance is actually a major job.
Yeah.
It's all very nebulous and soft, so there's a lot of judgment involved.
And I want those hours to come down in due course. That's my basis for this, yeah.
So that's going to be a joint task, and we're doing stuff as well with moving to Tech One Cloud.
Yep.
And that's going to assist in getting a good, well-resourced and stable accounting team.
Yeah. The minute we can start deploying our electronic, tools and things that we invested quite heavily in, and get, better data, things can change quite easily.
And the move to Tech One Cloud will allow easy deployment of their tools, but probably not for another to the next year's audit. We've got a full year there, and our own systems are stabilised.
Yeah.
Would be my take as a further audit partner.
Okay.
Did you?
No, it's right. I'll bring it up in the next
Got
item.
your questions?
I'll bring it up in the next item.
Any other points to raise on Benny's reports? If not, we have a recommendation on page 19 of our pack. But we received the audit plan, and I thank everyone for the spirited discussion. It's good to see a governance team that is actually engaged in the process. Do I have a mover?
Yep.
Thank you. Go fine, John. There being no further discussion, am I correct with that? All those in favour? Yes, Penny. Very.
Thank you, everyone. We will dial off if that's okay.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank
you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next item I've got on the agenda is one that didn't have a number, so I slipped over it. Would people like, sorry?
Going back to that.
Oh, apologies, thank you. 5.3 council report. I had a question and I hit my pad in the right place to remind me of it. Had anyone else got a further comment? Yes.
And I have.
Stephen
John was about to go, and then we jumped to audit.
Yep. That's why I had your name written now to remind me that you had.
I did have that, but I'll bring it up again. Where you go, John?
Okay. Yeah, just commenting on the deputy mayor, she said I agree that we should be more rigor around the budgets. When we do the work, especially capital budgets, and if we do the work under the budget, then that's a win. Go to the budget. It's a bit of unexpected thing. But we can't take anything that's under budget left and move it around, because it should be focusing on what was targeted. The annual plan should be in stone, in my view, and it's coming out of the LTP, our promise to our elected members. And it has been raised also about unbudgeted stuff. I know that's happened in the past. But really, especially the topics which are problems. But just on the capital works that we've unbudgeted, which is related and very seldom related. The question for you, and just for clarity, on page 61, you've got two figures there. The first one I always take, which is the last, is the sum of all of the subsidies. And the second one is the sum of the total cost. That's right. Page. The table on page 59 will actually get it earlier. Then 59 and 60. And then on page 61, you've got the same.
Yeah, that's the totals.
Yep. So there's a total of subsidies, 5.8 million and 6.599 is the total. When you look at that, the difference, which wouldn't mind having that in there in the report. So council is actually, even though it's unbudgeted, the work that we actually paying out is under a million, at just over 3/4. So 765, I thought. You could be better than me.
On the subsidy.
Yeah. So it's not bad, and that's what I'm saying. That's good, and it has to happen because it's just not going to be that. You can't think in advance of those things happening, but certainly with the operational ones, we can. And I think I'd like to see improvements there, obviously. That's my comments that I was going to say before.
Thank you.
You there, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, kia ora. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit late. I know our last last financial meeting which was on the 8th of April. And John, you were running the show at the time. And on council financial performance, I asked, because we got a subsidy from the government of 11.3 million on roading and 3.9 on new works. And I asked, where does this money got spent? Where did it go? And John, you did say that staff will look into it and get back to me. Well, this hasn't happened. I'm more worried about this 11.3 million. Was it for block culverts? Was it for roadside vegetation? Like pampas, the tobacco tree, etc. Because I know up in our area, very little's done. So where did this money go to? Does anyone know?
So, Matty, was that when I temporarily stood in for Graham at the last?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
But seriously, we need to know where this money is being spent. 11.3 million on roading, 3.9 on new works.
I'm not sure where the numbers are coming from.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Here,
Can't recall.
but I'm not sure quite where you're picking these numbers up from the report. So I'm struggling a wee bit here.
Well, you only need to look at the our agenda from on the April the 8th on council financial performances, page 22. It's all there.
We don't have the last meeting's report with us.
Right.
Yeah, through the chair.
So Councillor Radich, we have reported at the beginning of this meeting and on page 51 of the breakdown of where these categories sit in terms of emergency works and preventative maintenance, maintenance of local roads, local road improvements and road safety.
All right. Is that right?
Yeah.
We don't particular bits quantified under those 4 bullet points.
Oh, no. I can't
Just
get it.
like renewal subsidies been received for the following categories: emergency works, maintenance, local roads, local road improvements and road safety.
Some of them have a mix of operational capex as well.
Yeah. So that will again cloud the numbers a wee bit, even if they were presented, because there is operational and as you rightly pointed out, and capex. Fortune, so some's on the balance sheet, some's through the income statement.
See, I know for a fact that the government had given us quite a bit of money, and I'm pretty sure it's 11.3 million regard to roading on vegetation clearance and block culverts, etc., etc. And I know some work's been done. you know, on like, you know, block culverts, etc. But when I drive around on council roads, they don't look very impressive. That's why I asked the question, where's it all going to?
If I recall, I know we had that discussion, we can't recall the actual detail of the sum from the last meeting, but Councillor Wright, I presume if you go and look at your current agenda on page 59 with the itemised unbudgeted works, which is mostly road related, in fact all road related, in the last table I was talking about, is that what you're looking for generally? I thought you were concerned it's outside of this.
Well,
But
John,
we-
is that the subsidy from the government or is that from our money? Ratepayers' money?
This table on page 59 with
Yeah.
there is the subsidies from the government is you can see it in the line above, I think it is, and below is the actual cost of the work. And when you sum it up, we were spending only of our money, council's ratepayer funded 765,000. So what I'm saying is for the total road works budgeted and unbudgeted, were you looking for a breakdown like that? If you're looking for a breakdown like that, that's what could be supplied to you, I guess, by an email, I think was what came out of the previous meeting.
Yeah, for instance, I see your breakdown here, yeah. But you know, how much money, for instance, has been spent on culvert cleaning? How much money has been spent on the vegetation on the side of the roads? Because that was a big factor to get rid of all this pampers, tobacco, and all this stuff. And it hasn't happened. That's the worrying part. Because I know this money from government was allocated for things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what you were requesting. I think it's open to someone else to guide you on. So that's
It's a question for rating, not for
Yeah.
financial stuff.
Wondering whether this is the appropriate place, it's the Tikoko meeting.
we can
Yeah,
revisit that.
I know for a fact it's got to do with roading, but I can tell you it's just a waste of time at times with them. But it is in our agenda, and we should know about it.
Just on the report that Councillor Versvich was doing, we've got sort of the two numbers. Would councillors find it useful if those two numbers are offset to give a net cost to the council? The state top of page 60, we've got Honeymoon Valley. We've received a subsidy of 92,000 and the expenditure was 103,700. So the net on that is circa $11,000. Would it be useful if there was another column out to the right just with a net total?
Yeah, well, it's actually I requested that on page 63. Well, not 63, sorry, page
61.
61. The totals there, we had a net. That would suffice. So I would think having the net totals.
But maybe, are you able to have a think about that? I know we've had a go at this report a few times along the way, so this is an evolution process, and that's fine.
Just saves Steve and I doing mental calculations. They're getting different answers.
Yeah. Some of us are a little older, have only got so many brain cells left. Speaking for myself, that is. Not impinging anyone else. Any other comments along the way? I do have one that I'll just raise on page 50. And it's in the two tables. So the top table that shows us with CapEx of $56.7 million. Actual year to date, March, so that's 9 months worth. And our forecast position at 30 June 25 suggests that the annual forecast is 204 million compared to a budget of 192. So am I reading that we're going to spend $150 million in this quarter? And if so, is that number actually right, or is it impacted by issues like creditors and accruals. And because it seems to me that in 3 months, we're going to do 3 times the amount done in the first 9 months. And it just doesn't quite ring true to me. And if anyone's got a thought on that.
It's the final run before the election, so putting the horse, spend that 150 mil, all that stuff.
Will there be a steward's inquiry into how much whip was used? So I guess that's, to me.
I wasn't answering your question, so
No.
I need to answer it.
No, but that's the question that sits there is, have we got numbers there that are actually have got some issues with them? Or is that the case that we will spend $150 million near on in the 3 months? So I guess maybe staff can have a wee look at the reports and going forward and trying to give us a bit of clarity, but to me, that's a reasonably obvious question to raise. Any other thoughts from councillors?
So we've spent 27.7% of our annual budget with only 3 months to go.
Yeah.
100. We always bring this up, Graham. We get crickets. And we know there's multi-projects. We had this in Te Coco. We want Gantt charts for our so the roading one, you know, like we get to see. We bought the stuff to have better oaks.
Yeah, I do know that this is the prime roading season through sort of February, March, April, May, in most councils. So it may be that there's just a truckload of work to be done, but I guess that was the question. Yeah, and as we move into this wonderful Tech One cloud, we may be able to get better visibility. So is there a phasing issue about when we've said in our budgets it's going to happen? You know, the accounting has been working with what we like to call the legacy system. That means it's tired and it's probably not of best use. That's in the process of changing. Councillor Court, did you have a comment?
Pretty much what you just said, if we cannot be at all unusual that at the end of the construction season, which is where we get the lion's share of the invoices coming in now, so that quite often changes financial position for that work.
So our contractors may not be invoicing until they've got to a point that they're able to invoice. So it's not, the timing of what we're seeing in the reports may not be reflective of the work that's being done.
Can I get a ballpark amount from staff? So we're currently sitting at 27% of the annual forecast capital expenditure. And we've only got 25% of the time left. What are we guessing in just overall percentage terms? What? Because currently it's what, 56.7 mil spent on capex, but across against the budget of 200 mil. What are we expecting to finish the year's end with?
I don't think that's an unreasonable question to be raising, but probably not a reasonable question to expect an answer now.
I will be asking the question. So
And what I'd want in the answer is how much would I expect to finish on? How much of that remainder is multi-year projects? So if we should have expected that it would not be spent right now, but how much is, we talked about phasing, but I would like to know what is phasing and what is capability within our team and what can we do to support you to make sure that we get your better resource to deliver.
There's a bit more on page 56 on this particular topic. This will impact into the assessment of carry forwards on contracts. There would be funding that we haven't done the work. So I suspect that our August meeting is likely to be a place where we might get a bit of an indication of what carry forwards are being proposed. So I will tie together at that point. So anything you can do and perhaps reporting in this newfangled system that you've got. To be obviously appreciated by councillors in this area. It's pretty key as capital expenditure because in reality, a council is just a large infrastructure company. This is sort of the core business. We do some other things, of course, but you are effectively an infrastructure entity. Any other comments before we move to the recommendation?
Can I finish?
You can.
Can I have a say?
You can.
Page 53, roading and footpath below budget 16.3 million. This is at the end of June. There's things there that say fully committed for the financial year, but under budget, fully committed. How can that be given we've got 3 months to go? Budget isn't that big, that's recycling and waste management. There's a whole lot of things under budget, not required at this stage. There's amounts of money there, 1% of rates under stormwater and wastewater. District facilities insurance over budget by 554k, that's 0.5%, 0.6. And I've asked these questions, what's the impact on our insurance and depreciation of our and AMP data? If you go to pages 56 and 57 and look at the new works and then renewals, if you go down there, wastewater over budget by 2.6, and that's ahead of schedule. Find a lot of stuff. Design and survey. So that's, we're not going anywhere, that's just design and survey. Septic screen, can't do it because we've got to move a carport or something, project delayed. The delays in resource consents, design, etc., add up to 2.2 million there. Go down to page 57, there's another 1.6 million there. Kawakawa project is design and consenting. Open only design works, program works being scoped. And this is what I've been saying for a while. We need to plan this work accurately so we can accurately get our budget sorted out. But if you go through what hasn't been spent, added over 3,940,000 hold-ups versus the over budget added up to 8.2 million. Just the reason I keep going on about the AMP and the RAM. So the asset management condition assessment, that's why I didn't bring it up with Benny there. It affects our depreciation. We've got to know our condition assessment because it affects our value and our repairs and maintenance budget. The RAM data is really important. Regional Transport Committee, the 24-27 NZTA fund for the Northland transport expenditure is $2,070,577,920. That's a lot of money over 3 years. And we need to be spending 10% of it, our share. And our share is significant. The fact that it looks like whether it's 27% or 50-something percent, I saw it on a page here, I looked at it. Capital performance, roading and footpaths. Actual year to date was 22.5 at the end of May. LTV budget is 44. So we're about halfway. It shows at 40%. And it's hard to know if the full year is 55.8 million or the LTV budget of 48.38258. So there's just, I've got some serious concerns about all this. If you go to capital spend analysis, page 69, the carry forward budget there over all the projects is 45 million. Roading in that part of it is, where it is, only 11. Out of a healthy budget of 47. There are numbers all over the show. Capital spend analysis by percentage, roading and footpaths, 48.8%. Probably where I got it from. Just seems there's few percentages and things don't line up. But my biggest concern was that, and I wrote it down in Benny's paper here somewhere. The asset infrastructure, revaluation of infrastructure assets. Roads include sealed and unsealed, culverts, bridges, retaining walls, Gabion cages, rural stormwater and drainage, signs, lights, footpaths, pedestrian crossings. And then we got a new urban stormwater component of our roading contracts as well. and some scrapes, pipe work, etc. So I just think, you know, there's a massive amount of money there, and we have to pay particular attention to our land data and our asset management plan. I know there's a process in place for both items. I think it's 2.5 years. I've been banging on about this. A lot of money.
I've just returned to the comment I made. We are in fact need to think like an infrastructure management company as a council for most of our areas, whether it be Three Waters or roading or community facilities. You're managing infrastructure, so I have sympathy. I'd have to say that most councils are in exactly the same boat, that their asset management systems are probably not up to what you would expect if this was a commercial enterprise. And that's what we've got to aspire to.
Well, you just think roading though, you know, the NZTA's investment in Northland is, we value that, but we also want value for money. And we can't get value for money if we don't know what we're doing. Just got to change the game. And I only think of us as a big infrastructure company, nothing else. Anyway, moving right along, I'll give Angie my bits of paper if she wants it. She can just light the fire with other office.
Do any thoughts, Guy, at this stage?
It's focus, carry forward, you know, budgeting for cap, that's account for cap. So the project management systems coming online to hopefully help us zero in all the net positions.
2.07 million in 3 years for state highways and local roads. A big project. We don't look after it all. It's three territorial authorities and NZTA.
We need to make sure that we're accounting well and managing well the portion that we are allocated out of that pot. I know we've had discussions, I know, Guy, about asset management and various other things. I know you're doing stuff in it. And as I say, this is endemic across the sector. In my view, is the state of the records. In some of it's historical, a lot of these assets that we're maintaining have been around well before computers were thought about. And capturing of all that data is really difficult. So it's not an easy project. So I don't think this is a beat up on the staff, but we've got to work out how can we catch up, get our systems to the right era, the 21st century. So, any other comments? We have a recommendation on page. Someone can help me. 47, thank you. You're happy to move go far? Do I have a seconder? Thank you, John. No further discussion? All those in favour? Against, any carried. Now, I've managed to skip over a supplementary report, which was on terms of reference. The various things that's in this particular document. Any particular preferences amongst councils as to what we deal with that? Perhaps maybe immediately before we go on PX, if everyone's happy with that approach, given all as a supplementary paper. The next report we've got is 5.4, which is level of service. And again, Angie, these comments on that. We're talking about pages 71 to 88. Yeah.
So, the KPI report is mainly focusing on the quarter January to March. However, you haven't received this throughout our Pride meeting. It's due to changes in the organisation. So I've provided all 3 quarters at this stage. You have been provided the comments from each department. There's a number of KPIs that we've disclosed that have been mandatory through our LTP process. So I will just leave it open to comments.
Right, before we go into the questions, the report, is this an example of the reporting that's now available in the new Tech One Cloud reporting?
No,
No, it's
not. This is still within what we've done prior.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarity. Do you have any comments from councillors? So far, you appear to be lingering on the bed, are you?
No questions.
No questions? Anyone else?
Can I just make an observation? I found this incredibly challenging to read. I'll say that as criticism. I'm sure you tried really hard, but it's really the beach. And yeah, the very first one, which I spent a lot of time on, libraries. And I thought, do we really only see a 3.3% satisfaction? And we're not used to thinking, how do I know I'm benchmarking against? And I just found it busy and confusing. Sorry.
Yes, we, this committee is a assurance, risk and finance committee. So if we'd just been a risk committee, I'd probably be saying, let's just focus on things where there is a risk we're not going to achieve and understanding where that is. And that may be a useful lens to provide. I'm not sure on these things where the crossover between the Tikaho committee. It might be worth thinking about making sure we're not asking the same questions. And where the prime play is for a report like, because this is very quite operational. I'm just wondering whether it's the right place. Maybe there's a bit of thought. We're not having meetings for the sake of having meetings. We're talking about the same thing twice. See a few nodding heads around the place, and I'm not sure where that ought to sit.
Also, the parts relevant to the community boards used to go to the community board meetings. Yeah.
So that a big picture and understand the size of the organisation. Likewise, your sort of satisfaction, Q1 here at 3, well, is it 3%? I'm just trying to find that number in the slide. I need one of the glasses. Yeah, I just wondered whether your question, whether we've got the right measures sitting actually out there and whether we've got the capability of measuring it properly, which will come and surface in the audit processes, because they will ask those questions.
Chairman, can I just offer a heartfelt apology to our library lady over here because I did read it wrong. And we actually had a really good result for this year. So since we're live streaming, I need to do that.
Apology will no doubt be accepted, and I've gone and followed up. So yeah, there is a lot of data here. I'm trying to work out what it all means. I'm just wondering whether the questions mean that we ought to be having a think about it. Because if a ratepayer got to see this, what would, without all the knowledge that we have in this room, how would they interpret it? I don't know. But there's obviously an awful lot of data out there, which is wonderful. I guess it's how do we focus it through?
It's a good way for, you know, what is that group? Criticising councillors, something like that. It's a good report for them to dive into and compare to our long-term plan to, you know, track our delivery, our service levels.
To me, I think councils are probably going to be more interested in where there is risks of non-performance to what we committed with the community. And are we on track? Am I reading the comments coming through? Certainly, if we can manage to focus in on the key ones, those where we might end up with shots coming to us, especially as the councillors are heading into the hustings. And we'll probably be hearing this, it means that they're going to be well armed to answer the questions that might get thrown at them. Councillor Court.
Can we workshop this at some point? I just interesting in light of recent commentary that it says that our roads meet levels of service at 98.2%, and our footpaths meet levels of service at 99%. I'm quite confident our customers have no clue with them. I'm quite confident that the elected members sitting around this room have no clue. Just you laughing at me. I don't think we need to have a deeper dive.
And try and work out what we're trying to achieve, because, you know, service levels are our contract with our community about what we're going to deliver. Have we therefore got an understanding of what is the service level? Is it the right one? Is it able to be measured objectively? Because Benny and his team are going to ask those questions probably down the track. This is all quite a new area in accounting as we think about non-financial performance measures. So I think we're all learning at the same time. So your idea of a workshop, it's probably not part of this committee, but understanding what it is. And I know many councils this triennium are actually shrinking back their performance information because they dived in and really found that they couldn't get it all because there wasn't good understanding. And I'm hearing that this council might be in a similar boat. Needing to have a good think about things.
Can I just add to that though? We also didn't get to workshop the levels of service that we can change before the last LTP. So yeah, I think it's good to review, and
This time will be probably, this time of the cycle is probably not bad because the LTP is going to be surfacing
yes.
in the not too distant future for the new council. So if we can impart any learnings, Angie, you were going to make a comment.
I was just going to say that a lot of the KPIs that we have been, they are being given to us, they're mandatory.
Yeah.
Through the DIA, so.
Yeah, well, if the Lords in Wellington say must, we must. But
Yeah, have increased a lot of the KPIs from prior LGPs.
Councillor McNally, you reminded me that maybe it's almost cup of tea break.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a good reminder. We'll get to the end of this item and maybe take a quick break. Any other comments on this report?
I just one quick. I think a workshop to look at how we can summarise the governance report a little. I don't want to take away from the detail, but there's also big include that too. That maybe just making available on the website.
Sounds like a capital idea. We have a recommendation on page 71 for a sort of ask for a mover and seconder. Any last comments? If not, do I have a mover? Thank you, John. Seconder?
Yep.
Thank you, co-founder. All those in favour? Against, if any? Carried. We perhaps look to be back here ready to run at 11:45. I think I detected there was some rather tasty looking leftovers from yesterday next door. That encourages people to move.
Right on things like you've done with the staff, where you get to get an in-depth look into what the mahi is or something like that. But maybe there's something to do. I just want to use this opportunity to highlight the appreciation that we place as an organisation on all of our roles, but in particular our libraries.
Yes, I'd say, hey, here to that, because my My good wife's original career was as a librarian, so. Yes, but I think we're into a period that's been progressing since COVID of far less social tolerance. And when we see some of the international leaders and their approaches to things, it's certainly an evolving issue, and I can't see it going away. Certainly.
On page 93, actions from previous meeting, committee would like to know what current process or future actions have been taken regarding safety at public events. And I read those and I thought, there's nothing actually in there, physically in there, that will protect staff or elected members at a public event if they were faced with really aggressive behaviour. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, so I just wanted to have a conversation. So develop a policy, training and awareness, environmental design, support systems, enforcement and follow-up, legal and regulatory compliance, culture and leadership. If we know that staff are going to be somewhere where threats are real, I would like to see security guards in there. Someone who's actually empowered to step in and protect our staff, protect our elected members. I don't see that in there. And unfortunately, it's getting really bad out here. And some elected members, not us fortunately, I don't believe, but in the country, on the webinar that I've been on, are actually getting hurt, re-hurt. I think we need to have another think about, I know that's a bit of a crystal ball. You don't always know when someone's going to fire up. It's just, I just put it out there. I think it's missing.
It's my observations from being at other councils. Number 3 on your list on page 94 actually becomes really important, which is the environmental design. And is it possible for, with the layout of the facility, for people to be able to exit the area without having to go past potential trouble causes, such as where you've got a counter at the library, is there a door off the back that can be they can go through and exit themselves and shut it to have a level of protection? Again, we're into the election period and where you're running meetings. Are the halls and such like being looked at, the layout of the hall to allow those that are speaking from, whether they be elected members or potentially elected members, are able to egress out without going through where the public is? And certainly at one of my other councils, this was a problem last election and in a hearings situation, and they had not thought about that as they could have, and that's resulted in a complete change, that some halls are always pre-spec and facilities to actually have an egress that is easy for those that are likely to be targets to exit. So thinking about that in each of the facilities, and certainly at other councils that have been some design changes with that viewpoint done on each of the council facilities to allow that, so that people can actually just exit the situation if it becomes untenable, or is appropriate still to be there from a safety point of view. Thank you, Ruben.
Yeah, I can just acknowledge and advise that those are in place. Facilities. Councillor, and to your comment, we rely heavily on the things that we can do with restrictions to budget availability and planning. We had looked at increased security as an option, but through the rounds of budget reviews, those were less of a priority during that particular process. So the work that you see that's been carried out is in the areas that we can make some significant improvements. And I think just around the training and preparation of staff around antisocial behavior, we're definitely making sure that teams are well equipped on how to handle those situations. With consideration to the building and degress and plans, that's a big topic for us with the Kaikohe library here that is underway, this project. A lot of that was specifically considered during the design phase, so just wanted to add that.
Can I just expand on that one, because I've been in situations in my life really recently when we were at Te Puputi Patakoria Public Day, where a member of the public quite distressed. I was concerned for the staff member. We were in a public place and it didn't progress any further, but it could have. And budgetary constraints, I don't think. If that's the reason, then we need to revisit that. But if we know, for example, we're going to go out there and consult on something that's going to be quite controversial, rates increases, animal control, and notwithstanding the public's right to have their say to staff and elected members, and that can be quite passionate. If it crosses the line, that happens rapidly, really, really quickly. And we do need to have some consideration about times where you might need more staff members. It could even be security or being in a really public place, which is likely to control people's emotions. I won't go into that any further.
Any other comments from councillors?
Regarding the report,
Regarding the report, I think we've looked at issue 1, action 1 that from the previous meeting. Any comments on perhaps action 2, which was
Yes. Redwood trees.
redwood trees?
Just noting the health and safety report comment on the redwood tree incident, mentions addressing immediate risks and a maintenance plan to support healthier trees less susceptible to toppling over. Just checking with the CE, that is in lieu of the process that we started at the Tekoko committee meeting. So whatever process we need to go through for the full removal is still underway.
It is.
Yep, cool, thank you. That's all.
Anything you wish to add?
So Ruben, yours.
What happened, Greg?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, carry on.
I've actually done a wee site visit and I was staying right there to educate myself.
I'm still of the opinion that however remote that risk is, we need to address it. And the risk being that one of those trees falls on the care home and at the risk of serious injury or death to somebody. That risk for council is very real, and if it happens sometime in the future, we'll all be sitting here with everyone examining, looking at hindsight and saying, why didn't you do something about it? You were warned that these trees are dangerous. One of them fell down previously. So I think we have to act on that. We've just been seeking clarification from the arborists in terms of their risk classification, but to be honest, an arborist risk classification or risk assessment is very different to council's risk assessment. They don't really marry up, I think. But Ruben, do you want to just outline the conversations you've had with the arborists, etc.?
Yes, absolutely. So we've taken this very seriously, obviously. We have engaged arborists to go out and inspect and have a look at the risks associated with the overall collection of trees on both locations. And their assessment, based on the matrix that they use, is that they're all in generally good, healthy condition. Which means that there is no, from an arborist point of view, the necessary technical feedback from them to allow us to consider any of our own risk assessment. As our chief executive rightly pointed out, we have a different aptitude or tolerance to risk that we need to consider. The arborist report is just one piece of information that we use to assess that. With that in mind, the immediate work has been around removing the trees that have been identified to be risky, which have, 2 of those have been removed. 1 further tree is in the process of being removed. There's also regular maintenance and resilience for the trees that currently stand. There's a piece of work involved that is being conducted this month as a scheduled activity, which includes removal of hangers and debris, removal of extensive dead wood in canopies, removal of epicormic. Please don't ask me what that is. That's arborist terminology, but that is related to the base of the trees, related to the roots of the trees, and also applying mulch over the grounds to alleviate ground compaction. So those are some mitigating regular maintenance activities that are already scheduled, and they're being conducted this month in terms of the general maintenance of the trees to ensure that council's responsibilities regarding health and safety or maintenance of these trees on these reserves, we're addressing those. The health and safety concerns around trees falling onto Retirement Village, that is a factor that the chief executive is currently considering to identify what immediate actions could come from that. But from an arborist perspective, they're even with the recent 3 or 4 visits since incidents have occurred, they still feel like those trees overall are in general good health.
Thank you. It's awesome. Will this go up online, or are you keeping in contact with the Retirement Village?
Yeah, happy to. This is hot off the press.
Oh, okay, all right.
I spoke to Harry Sumter this morning.
Okay,
and
excellent.
I'll be talking to her again today.
Yep.
Look, in the world I come from, we do a lot of risk analysis, and this would be categorized as a high severity, low probability risk, which is something we never used to take in banking. I'm just of the opinion we can't leave that situation out there with the consequences that may come about if we have another storm. So I'm happy to take comments, but at this point, having just had the update from Ruben earlier this morning, I'm of the mind that subject to consulting the legal department and things, that I have discretion to get these trees taken down. And that's what we should do.
I just had one more question for Ian. Thanks for your report, and the table and everything. How do you capture, or how does the organisation ensure that there's support for the staff impacted by sudden passing away of staff, mental and emotional support?
Yeah, Councillor Stratford,
It's sorry.
Councillor Stratford, I guess you're prompted by some of the recent occurrences in council. So from a monitoring of the wellbeing perspective, one of the best resources that we've got is our, in addition to just sort of saying, hey, we've got that they will come in and provide a counselling session to any number of affected people. We've found they've been quite effective. Happening at the moment for the recent incident.
Yep. Thanks for that, Ian.
Through the chair, I can probably add to that, Deputy Mayor, and that I've asked my team to work with health, safety and wellbeing, Te Hono, and a number of other parts of council, including finance, so that we have internal guidelines about how we treat the sudden passing of a staff member, because there are insurance to be aware of. There's obviously a wellbeing element for everyone, as well as on the people and capability side, lots of like processing of pays and that kind of thing. So an internal guidance for the whole organisation on how we respectfully treat these situations. And when
That's me now. I think we were getting back to trees, were you?
Yeah, I just want to, regarding the arborist, what do you call an adequate investigation? One question. But the key one is, what liability do they carry in the event of something happening? And do they have insurance cover for it? It's not going to cover a life.
Well, I think very clearly all care and no responsibility.
Okay.
If we flip the question around and said, okay, guys, if all these trees are healthy, then you guarantee us one of those trees isn't going to fall in a storm and injure somebody. That one.
So now that it says in the report, there are no financial implications, and yet that action 2 would suggest there's cost of reports and remedial work and things like that. So, but I'll move right on to the next one. Under that, I received an email from Hillary last night. I've just shared it. One of the things she wrote in there: do exotic unwell trees matter more than people's lives? We need to rebuild our gardeners areas, but are not able to do this until such time as the trees are removed. So this is costing us time and money. We are holding off on closing down the hospital wing of our care facility. An update would be appreciated with urgency before I have to update my board and our health and safety committee on what is happening. And you've told me that you've spoken to her this morning, so I'm happy to accept that. The other one, I received an email, it's a bit from a Steve somebody around, regarding the Whangai tip. Steve Cornwall. And he's raised concerns about health and safety because the tip's been rearranged somehow. High walls, dangerous for people to put waste into the container, dangerous for staff to push the green waste into the rear of the container. He's gone on to a whole lot of things. So I just responded that I'd bring it up at today's meeting, and perhaps someone can have a look at that. And whether it needs to be shut down temporarily until it's sorted or not, I don't know, but I think staff.
We could perhaps make an action point for a report back next meeting, and you've got a note sitting there. I can see it being written as we go. Right.
That tip understood. Particularly dangerous.
Yeah,
it has an embankment built up so the containers are below it. Like a rail to stop yourself falling into the container.
Yeah, it's just been raised, so I've handed it on to our team here. Thank you.
Yes. Is that, which topic are you on, Ian?
I'm just going to say to Councillor McNally that if you would like to forward that to me, I can follow it up for you.
Yeah, I'll do that.
So we'll just have it as an action point for a report back. Going back to trees, this sort of exposes the overlapping responsibilities that under the OSH legislation that the rest home retirement village will have under their perception of a risk and our perception and management of it. And it goes slightly wider with those trees that are on the opposite side of Kerry Road near Ferry Springs. There's been a lot of logging in the back, and I went and had a wee look there. And what I do know from other councils, particularly Environment Canterbury, because in the south we do tend to get those rather strong nor'westers, that if you take away by partially logging an area, you actually increase the risk on the downwind side, because those trees have not been used to have it being exposed directly to large winds. So there are some trees, I think some of them are on council, many of them are on private property, which are now starting as a result of that incomplete logging operation. They're seeing there to pose risks to half a dozen places between the Woodlands Camp and Ferry Springs Road, just there, and quite where that all sits within the council's responsibilities, particularly when you've got a a developer, a third party developer involved, and we're in public, so I won't make any further comment, but there's an interesting division of responsibilities in both those circumstances. That I'd be certainly interested in understanding where the right line is. Whether anyone's capable of here or whether it's again a matter to be thought about.
I think. Before. I'll go, but yeah, those trees, I know that there is talk about it, but look, we had an arborist look at the trees before, and this is the one that fell down. And you know, in my experience, one tree looked absolutely healthy. And when it was taken out, the guy said, "You dodged the bullet on that one, it was rotten in the middle." And when it starts to die, even a little twig, something looking bad, may not signify much, but underneath it's usually the roots that go. In some cases, and it's a fungus which can be, and that means it's not stable in a wind. And I suspect that's what happened with that one. So I'm of the opinion that given the scale of the risk, small mandate there. Did I upset you there?
Probably.
No.
Apologies, I'll try and die quietly.
I'll talk what you like. You talked about low probability, high
Severity.
We live in a beautiful farm with the trees grow, like. And we had probably thousands of hectares of land and thousands of trees. I think this warrants a timely review of our tree policy and our delegation of the community board, so we're not in a position of sitting here to judge, jury and executioner on a tree. I think in cases where there's a low probability but a high severity impact, that needs to be handled at an operational level. Coming here to the governance table, we're not arborists, we're not qualified to have an opinion on if a tree is likely to fall down or not. But I think that this has consumed a lot of time and energy at Ugo Money. And I think there must be a tidier way to do this moving forward. So I'm mindful that that all sits in Roger's team. Probably. I do think this is something we should add to the work stream and give the CEO the authority just to act where there's an imminent threat to public safety.
The CEO is the primary person responsible for us in the organisation, and I think my view is that we've got to give the authority just to get on with that.
Yeah.
That's right.
I accept that. What do you base that decision on? You know, it can't just be hearsay. You have to have something to base it on. So that's why I think a policy rewrite would be, that gives you that tool, would be helpful.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. When I consider the incident, so it actually happened, and then you've got pre-warnings of situations within the wider thing, and then you've got the post when it happens, and that's basically what's really drawing the information. And I want to acknowledge Ian's report, because on pages, what's that page? On this page, that indicates the training and awareness, environment design, enforcement and follow-up, but in particularly legal and regulatory compliance, alongside culture and leadership. the combination of those that can add to what councillor Court is talking about, a policy that gives us some guidelines. Was we will continue to have robust discussions in council, trying to get down to the nuts and bolts of what should actually happen. But not also forgetting some crucial members on the ground, which is the community boards that voice their concerns about their notice for informing the decision. I like to hear, I like the idea of a policy because that gives us some guideline. It removes the notion that an arborist is going to give us a decision to say it should be taken down or not. But what I've heard today is that the arborist will tell us how healthy or not healthy a tree is, which may not influence our decision. And therefore, for me, I like an idea, I like the thought of a policy that gives us some good guidelines, some specific discussion points, so that we're not looking for blame or trying to affect processes. And also, I think it will be a good precedence for this type, because it's not only going to be Redwood, it could be somewhere else. So I like that idea that Council Court gives guidelines to the.
Another brutal financial view to it is, what is the cost to maintain these trees, keep getting them checked out and all that sort of thing, versus are we better just to say it's the ongoing costs, they're an ongoing burden, and ultimately they may need to be taken down anyway.
Absolutely.
So I guess taking the emotion out, looking purely on financial, what's the right answer? I think CE needs to be given the power, just,
and
I believe he has it, just to make those decisions and get on with it.
And I think it also aligns with the culture and leadership. So let us not forget those two.
So I agree with Anne. The policy that is dated 2008 references that if it's a group of trees, it must go, or on our reserve, it must go to the community board after consultation. However, so yes, let's review that. If we're identifying today that this risk is we're not able to address it swiftly enough, and we want to bring that level of risk, that level of decision making to a council table rather than consultation with community board, then yes, we need to rewrite the policy. But I don't think we do want that. We still want community boards to be responsible for reserves and plots of trees. We just want to ensure that when there is risk, like one of the assessment criteria in that existing policy is there risk to property if the tree falls? You know, does the neighbouring property owner want that removed? Yes or no? So with all that, plus the health and safety risk, I think that there is adequate framework to go through for the CE to be enabled to do the job. Yeah. I don't know if everyone understands what I'm saying, but if you'd like me to send a link to the existing policy, everybody, I was.
Have a look at that. Just a thought before I come back to you. If it was last reviewed in 2008, that was pre the odd legislation being in place. So we may need to actually review it to bring that factor into account. Data.
I think the last bit I was just also reminding myself was we're discussing trees and materials on council lands, but we may also have to consider on private lands that will impact upon our things as well.
That was one thing I wanted to clarify, was that remaining standard is the Ferry Springs Road down to Woodlands motor camp. Has this got anything to do with us, or should we just be, because parties are looking to the council, but is it actually our role? Or is this stuff that's actually outside our sandpit, in which case we should be clearly communicating that to them. Because, you know, those trees there were ultimately, if we on Kerry Road, was extended through all in one shelter belt, if you went back a good number of years from my little bit of research. I may be wrong, but
I only wish, Chair, that the wind stops blowing on our side of the property.
I guess there's a few things that have been raised here. So we've got a tree policy. It's clear, I think, that the CE has responsibility as the view of the committee and to go, is empowered to make decisions and just let them get on with it. And when could we realistically see a tree policy coming back through? Because that represents risk. So I think if we could circulate back through, it is a policy. So it is within the CE's realm to sign off. But given the impact of OSH and things, I think that should be probably reflected and override that if there is an imminent and present threat or perceived threat, that the CE should be able to just get on with it. And I'll just highlight the operational costs of keeping the trees. If we're going to keep putting arborists up them every year and having a look, that's quite a major ongoing operational cost, which again is a risk to a budget, because I dare say we don't have a budget for it.
Sorry, just to clarify, budget is identified as our responsibility to maintain trees within our district. Those reviews are conducted every 2 years.
2 years.
Off the cuff ones done after significant weather events,
Yep.
additional ones.
Not a formal full review, but an on-site check after the significant revisits following the significant event.
I think this is quite an ongoing cost for the council of trees that are not listed or anything from my understanding. I guess it's a commercial decision. I think our CE is very capable of those. Would be my penny's worth.
You just need to be mindful through you, Mr. Chair, that we have delegated them to the community board, so we do need to be respectful. So that's why policy, that gives them the opportunity to participate in that conversation.
Is it on the agenda tomorrow? Community board agenda tomorrow?
Not that I know of.
What's the delays? Unacceptable.
Well, I'm not talking about the redwoods, I'm just talking about the tree policy. Exactly.
Thank you for clarifying.
Excellent. So we have a recommendation on page 89 if there are no other discussion. I have someone move the recommendation on page 89 for clarify. Councillor, you'll second that?
Yep.
Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, if any? We're currently receiving the report.
Yep.
The next report, Emma, People and Culture.
Thank you. Through the chair, just reflecting on the earlier conversation regarding vacancies. Page 101 of this report notes that we do have 25 open vacancies that are actively in recruitment at the time of running this report. There are a number of other vacancies which aren't in recruitment for various reasons. So it might be that the positions just become vacant and the recruitment process hasn't been triggered, or in some cases we have part-time people working in roles that have been voted as full-time roles. So there's a part of an FTE that isn't being recruited to. All of that is being worked through at the moment to look at those inactive vacancies and assessing what is the plan with those. If they've been inactive for a period of time, we have to ask the question, do we need these positions? So that work is being done for budgeting purposes at the moment. I also just wanted to highlight on the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. With our funding for this financial year, we had 30 placements to make. And as of today, we've got 6 to go, which we've got a plan to meet, and I'm confident we'll be meeting that target. There is a change in the program for the next financial year. The focus is on placing more Ministry of Social Development main benefit clients. So in the funding that is being made available to us, 80% of our placements, so there's 27 placements we would have to make, 80% of those would need to be MSD main benefit clients, with the balance can be non-MSD but still meet that needs criteria. It will mean that we change the way we approach this program quite significantly in order to meet those targets. And we're in discussions with the Mayors Task Force for Jobs program at the moment and working that through, but we have given a commitment that we would like to continue with the program for the next financial year.
Can I add to that? Just on the Mayors Task Force for Jobs discussion, because Ministry of Central Government had changed what they promised, which was to give us ultimately the flexibility to work with any 16 to 24-year-olds and fund whatever barriers are in their way to them getting into education, employment and training. So this is a huge shift because we'll no longer be funded or tasked with a broader remit, and the final is the 60th worst council in the country out of 67 territorial authorities for NEET rates. 16 to 24-year-olds got an education, employment or training. Currently have 1,927 of those across the far north. It's not doing anything. But so a lot of me is actually really wild with this change, because it felt, the perception was that we've now been asked as councils to just be remote officers for WINS, for MSD, and to have to take on their referrals. So they're two hard baskets. You deal with it now, council, but with less funding and more restrictions. So a lot of mayors and Mayors Task Force for Jobs coordinators are actually pulling out of the program. I've always been for it, because regardless of even if they are too hard, they're still partners. There's still kids in our community that need a job and need help to get a job. So I always come with the glass half full, because I've not asked them who, and if not asked them, we'll lose, our district will lose out on additional funding. So I try to look at the broader picture. But ultimately, I think it's always up to our staff. We have to do the work on the ground, because I don't have to actually do the real work on the ground, right? And our staff are happy to continue and have a really good working relationship with our local Ministry of Social Development officers. And we already are targeting those 18 to 24-year-olds, and there's currently 1,109 18 to 24-year-olds in the Far North District as we speak on job seeker benefits. We need to get jobs. So if we can get a couple 100,000, which will employ our Mayors Task Force for Jobs coordinator, actually a part of our bid has been to get an additional employee to help out, then I'm all for it. So I'm happy with where it is. Unhappy there's less flexibility, but we're still going to get money in, we're still going to have employees in our council, and we're still going to be able to meet outcomes that will benefit people. At the same time though, I mean, it's an election year, so it's the Mayors Task Force for Jobs. I would expect that there may have to be a revision of the contract in further years subsequent to that.
Thank you. There's always pressure with looking at the payroll budgets versus the numbers of open positions and things. But one thing I've seen in some other councils is starting to split the consultants' costs between those that are consultants because we don't have the internal staff, and consultants that would have been consulting regardless, so that you've got an understanding then of looking at your payroll and salary costs plus the consultants' costs, because we may be incurring additional consulting costs because we've got these vacancies, which is probably at a higher hourly rate than if we'd had employees, and it's actually beneficial to bring the staff on if we can. So you're looking at a complete picture. People comprehend what I'm trying to say. So it's really, we might be employing consultants because we've got staff vacancies. You've got to start looking at that together. Versus consultants that you'd be having regardless are not substituting for a vacancy within the internal staffing structure. So that's just food for thought as to whether that might be worth thinking about within the assessments. Anyway, that was just an observation, but thank you for the report. Any other comments before we move to the?
Yes. Quickly, on the vacancies, it would be good to understand how many there are per month over a period of time, because we used to have that. And just looking at, what is it? What was it, 25? I mean, I don't know what the average salary is here, but I worked out to that being about a 1.6 million to $2 million worth of, if they were if they were full-time positions. And what used to concern me with that report that showed us, month by month by month vacancies, we were rating for those vacancies, and it would stay around that number constantly. Yeah, so that, and then that money goes to the departments for their spending, never mind the fact that the residents and ratepayers pay for a job that's not, someone else is doing it, but and I used to have a member of the Kaukau community always look at those numbers and say, look at all these vacancies, you guys are rating us for these vacancies and there's nobody doing that job. And we've seen, in some areas, the impacts of somebody not doing, being in a position like, just off the top of my head, property legalisation seems stressed. I don't know if we're recruiting for that. Other departments that, don't have somebody sitting in that role, we're rating for it. And it's operational, so we don't get to give that money back to the ratepayer.
That was to my point about understanding if we are covering that position with the consultancy arrangement.
Oh, yes.
So looking at those two together, because we've got a vacancy in an operational area, we may buy in the expertise.
But we often don't. It's just something, why is this not being done? Oh, sorry, we don't have a person in that role. Sorry for my cynicism.
Any other comments? We have a recommendation on page 96. If we got someone to receive the report, we got
somebody different.
Councillor McDowell.
Okay, I'll be a second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, if any. Conscious that we are about to move into PX and 1 o'clock is the target.
We've still got supplementary.
Oh, we've got supplementary. I was being too keen to get to 1 o'clock. Apologies. We have a supplementary report.
5.7 is in. This complete abatement notice update.
Turn over 2 pages in my agenda.
Page 106.
You're right. Turned over 2 million pages.
Chair, I've just received a message. Do you still have quorum if I?
4 is quorum.
4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Can we all go toilet first?
Sorry, I've just got something to down here with. I might be back, but you'll possibly finish by then.
Thank you, councillor. It's just confirmed that we do still have quorum.
Yeah. We have.
Should we do quickly the resource abatement notice? We'll move into PX and have a quick break.
Resource.
Consent abatement notice. I don't think it's changed much since the last report that we had.
No, only comment I've got a second.
Yes, I think it.
is that some of these got financial, legal high in the character sports, but all it seems to be doing is waiting on the report. And it doesn't change from a while ago. And I've said before, it can be some of the stuff dealt with quickly.
It's the high ones, I'd be really keen. My note was here, do we have expected dates for compliance into this report? It's particularly the wastewater desludging, it's highs all the way across. No indication when we will be compliant. Has any of the staff got a comment that they can provide us on that?
And the PX version of?
Yeah, it may be that it's dealt with in PX, but
No, the coffee one's not.
question I was raising, when this one was all highs across, we don't have any dates in this report, give us an indication when we will be getting the work done and the risk managed.
Tanya, is Tanya online?
Tanya is on hold.
She's in a meeting, I think, Guy. She's just had to pop out.
Could we perhaps just have that as feedback for next time, as give us some thoughts about when we will actually be back into compliance?
Mr. Chief, with the current system, I just dealt with it, and they've got septic tanks, and they started with the septic tanks, which they pay for. So I'm a little bit suspicious of why they've been dislodged, and I suspect it's just been lack of maintenance. Because it's actually taking a treated stream, sure, it may have some solids come floating up. But yeah, it's not a big problem to deal with, I would have thought.
Yeah. So,
Something that I'd like to be considered in future reports. Section 126 and 127 of the Local Government Act require a territorial authority to make an assessment on all drinking water services within their district, not just the ones that they're responsible for. And it goes on to say that a territorial authority must notify Taumata about any suppliers of drinking water services that are or appear to be failing to meet the supplier's statutory obligation or are at risk of doing so, and any other matters of concern arising from the assessment, including potential risk to community affected by that assessment. When I read that yesterday and preparing for my regional local water done well, Hui and Honore at the end of the month, I reflected on Kaya. There will be others. And we have a duty under section 127 to step in if the existing water supplier is. And I don't recall ever receiving the report that says we've done that. So I just like to flag it because and it's too premature to have that debate here today. I don't want to blindside everybody.
So we're aware of the Kaiwa situation. We've had discussions with Taumata Harawai and some action in the pipeline for that. I haven't had a recent update, but it's being looked at.
The others, I guess, would be my next question, and we add that to the report.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, there are. It's about 5 water systems in there, yeah, maybe 6.
Why it's critical at this point is John, Amir and I are going to a meeting in Whangarei, our first meeting of the week, to start the conversation with Whangarei and Kaipara, what a regional local water done well entity could look like. And if we don't understand what we've got and what our risks are, and they don't understand what they've got and what their risks are, it'll be very, very challenging to come up at the right position at the end of those meetings.
We just get a comment from Tanya on this one. Yep. And back into the room. So page 109, Tanya, wastewater treatment plant, sludging.
Yes,
What's the status there?
I believe the desludging has been completed. There are some other works to be carried out as well.
Okay.
Majority of those have been done.
The other thing, Council Court just pointed out is our obligations under the Local Government Act with regard to private drinking water supplies. We still have obligations, and Kyle was mentioned, so I just updated that we've had a conversation. I don't know why I want to leave, but I am not fully up to date. Where do we get with that in terms of actions? Nothing's really been defined, has it?
No, nothing. They were going to go through the chair. They were, Thomas Arawai was going to come back to us because they were having a conversation with the owners of the current Kyle water supply. Correct, the local government requires you, the territorial authority, to take ownership of water supply when the owners leave, if and when the owners leave. My understanding of Kyle is that is not the case in this particular instance, because council did own it and it was sold, and so that there's no obligation on the city. Like every time somebody walks away, that there's not the same obligation for council to take that water supply like there is the first time. But happy to go back and.
Are we pets? No.
No.
Sorry. I can add to that, but I can't. Yeah.
Okay.
So I wonder whether we can just recycle back through. And PX.
Yeah, let's do that.
As if we're naming any individuals or that sort of thing, they do have privacy considerations, so any particular commercial entity or whatever. Any other questions on this report outside that? Move to the recommendation, which is on page 106. Do I have a mover for that?
Yeah. So I'm having a second.
Yeah. Okay. All those in favour? Against, abstention, carried. We've got a resolution. We go on to PX on page 111. I keep forgetting this one. We have a supplementary report on our terms of reference and work plan. We read with Charlie.
I'll second.
Yeah, it's a combination, quite a bit of work over the period. I've reviewed it, I'm quite happy with it. The work, noting that the detailed work program is a dynamic document. And which is on pages, page 12 through onwards.
Yep, I'm happy with it. Mr. Chair's only comment I made, a question really, is that I looked at it, I see what that is. Page 11, where you're moving with the amendment as in place the current comprehensive internal audit framework. But if you look at ones below, I input annually into the setting of the internal audit program of work. So I presume that it's a bit redundant. Just repeat it twice and on both. So
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 places within the previous document where there was duplication.
Yeah.
That we identified.
So I'm happy.
Had quite a long teams meeting on this one. Going through line by line. So have we got someone that's happy to move the recommendation? You did. Okay.
And sorry, just on that line, I thought that meant, so the new item that is being added is review whether management has in place a current and comprehensive internal audit framework, or is it being removed? I read that wrong. Oh, okay.
I think the item that was on the previous one was removed and it's been substituted with
One,
reviewing it.
there's a few above. That you've got up. Yeah, above that, what I'm looking at,
From the proposed terms of reference.
that's removed, 6.4.1.
Column title. So we will still have, because we were looking at having an internal,
6.3.1.
where is it?
So we're removing 6.4.
Oh, there it is. Thank you. Right.
And you've got 6.3.1, which gives more of a detailed
Thank
thing.
you.
So,
Yes,
fine.
awesome.
Are we happy to proceed on that basis that we've got moved and seconded?
Oh, yeah.
Does that mean we have an internal auditor person dealing with us?
How it's going to be sourced is a matter probably for the next annual plan to be put in. There are lots of models. We can have someone on site, or we can use external providers, or we can use various combinations of the two. But if we've got controls within the organisation that we're relying on in our risk assessment, we do need to test whether those controls are effective. Going back to Betty's paper, there was a D and the controls that was designed effectively and implemented effectively. We can be happy that designed it correctly, but if they haven't been implemented, the control is actually ineffective.
Yeah, that's right.
It's doing a wee bit of testing in selected high risk areas. We should also do likes of a fraud risk assessment right across the organisation, based on the most risky perceived areas first. But anyway, we can deal with that a little more under Josh's course.
On that, didn't we used to have at this meeting a declaration from the CE that he's confident there is no fraud taking place?
That comes through as part of the annual audit process, where the auditors will talk with the CE and also talk with myself as head of partners. We have a motion moved and seconded on the table. All those in favour? Against, if any? Carried. Now we move to PX on page 111112. And is someone happy to move in that direction?
Yeah.
Yes.
Profile and John?
Yeah.
All those in favour? Against, if any? Carried. You can let us know when we're turned off as far as the recording. Then we'll move to public excluded. Just comes now to close the meeting with a karakia. Goodbye.
Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, kia te whai o tō tātou ara ki o iti paraiti me te aroha. Me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua taku, ake ake, amen.
Declare the meeting closed at 1:34, 36.